What's poppin', guys? Big K here, back on the podcast channel once again. And today we're going over my picks for Week 9 of the 2024 NFL season. And with all that out of the way, let's hop right into this matchup. So on Thursday Night Football, we got the Houston Texans going to New York to play the Jets. So now let's ask the question, well, what happened to both these teams last week? Well, no, okay, I'm not thinking of Houston. I was thinking 2 weeks ago when they lost a game, but last week they won a pretty close game against Indianapolis. It's kind of what I thought was going to happen. And then as for New York, everyone was talking about how New York was going to, beat the Patriots, get it back on track. I had a little feeling like, I don't know. I don't think the Jets are necessarily legit. So I picked the Patriots to win that game, and they did win that game. So now there's a lot more questions about how the Jets are going to be able to do for the rest of the season. And I don't know if this is going to be the game where they'll get it back on track. I mean, this is Houston, mind you. And the thing with Houston, too, that's interesting because people were thinking, like, the Jets might win this is because Stephon Diggs got injured this week. So how that's going to play into this matchup, I'm not sure. But I don't think it's going to necessarily cause them to lose the game. I mean, they were 10-7 last year, and that was when they didn't have Stephon Diggs. So I think they'll be just fine without him. I'm sure like they won't get as many like good looks that they would have had if he was in there, but I still think they're going to be a pretty good team at the end of the day. So I could see it going either way, but as for just this matchup, I'll just say that Houston is going to win it. All right, so now we're moving into the 1 o'clock window with this one. We got the New England Patriots going to Tennessee to play the Titans. The Titans are kind of in a mess right now, and Will Levis got injured. Maybe his flopping. I don't think his flopping around on the field necessarily helped them win anything because they're at 1-6 right now with their record. And the Patriots, and I know I'm kind of partial to them because they're my favorite team in the league. They're technically my home team, so favorite team equals usually the team that like is like local to you. So it's the Patriots for me. So I am kind of partial to picking them more than usual. But even I will admit, like this is a rebuilding team. They ain't gonna win that much games. But last week I'm like, I just could see them winning that game after how well they did in London against Jacksonville. I just could see it happening. Just going in there and upsetting the Jets, and that's exactly what they did. So I think this is the first matchup where it's like, yeah, the Patriots really are the favorites to win this one. Like, in probably the other matchups, they might have been the favorite, but in this one, it's just so obvious. Like Tennessee's just falling apart. They are slowly falling to one of the worst teams in the league, and the Patriots are just slightly above them. I think. I mean, they're still trash. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a rebuilding team, so they ain't gonna be exactly perfect, but I just think the Patriots are just the clear favorites to win this one. And in the next game, we got the Denver Broncos going to Baltimore to play the Ravens. This one was another one. I think this is the first matchup this week where I had trouble with. Oh, wait, maybe the Thursday night matchup was troublesome to, pick a winner for that one. Yeah, it was troublesome. But this one is kind of weird. And you may think, like, okay, it's Denver. They're obviously going to lose to Baltimore. A lot of people have the conception that Baltimore is just a better team on paper. But here's the thing with Denver, though. Their defense can really surprise you. And this is why I'm saying, like, they're at 5-3. Like, did anybody really expect them to start, like, or at least, like, at this point in the season, did anybody expect them to be at 5-3? I don't think so. I don't think anybody expected them to do that. And then you got Baltimore here. So what happened last week was I thought they were clearly going to beat Cleveland, and I was honestly surprised. Like, I looked at the score, I'm like, this is 29-24 over here in Cleveland. I'm like, and it came down to like the last play of the game. Lamar Jackson, he kind of missed it with the Hail Mary. And now I think Baltimore kind of fell into a slump, especially after losing that game. I mean, shit, I think I would fall into a slump too. Like, you'd think, like, okay, it can be Cleveland. They got Deshaun Watson injured, even though the whole situation there is kind of weird around Deshaun Watson. But I still think that Baltimore's going to find a way to come back. They're at home, which I think does help them a little bit. So I think that Baltimore will get it right with this game. All right, so we're moving to the next game, and we got the Washington Commanders going to New York to play the Giants. So, firstly, about Washington, that play in the game last week where they got that Hail Mary, that was one of the wildest things I've ever seen. So, the guy who was like the defensive back, Tyreek Stevenson, he was taunting like the fans like as the play was going on, and then right when he got the ball, he tips it to the Commanders wide receiver, and then that got them a touchdown that won them the game. Oh my gosh, you can't. Some of this stuff is like it's just right out of a movie, and that's just one of those plays where it's like, yeah, that's something that could just be right out of a movie. And as for this game, I think. I mean, come on. I mean, New York, I thought they did decent on Monday Night Football, actually, but I just don't think it's enough for them to get over the hump of Washington right now. I mean, I think this team has a lot of momentum right now, and if you asked a lot of people before the season, like, did anybody see Washington being 6-2 right now? I don't think anybody would have seen it. And now I'm looking at the standings here, and they're first place in the NFC East. Who would have seen that happening? I don't think anybody would have seen that happening. So for this game, I just think Washington's just going to continue the momentum that they're on. So that's that. And we got an interesting 1 o'clock game here. So it's the Dallas Cowboys going to Atlanta to play the Falcons. So Dallas, when did that happen? What happened to them last week? Oh, yeah, that's right. They lost on Sunday Night Football to the San Francisco 49ers, which now grants them the record of 3-4, which, it may be contradictory. Like, maybe they're not like that bad, but, I think they definitely have lost a bit. Certainly, I mean, Micah Parsons is injured. I do believe that he's going to be coming back soon, so that definitely will help them. But if he's not back, I think I'm going to give this one to Atlanta. Atlanta has shown a lot of promise over these past couple weeks that like they can win the division, and there's a huge there's a huge opening that happened in that division, I think, where Tampa Bay went down. They had a few guys go down, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Yeah, Mike Evans, that's the right guy. And then New Orleans had a couple guys go down, particularly Derek Carr. And then you had the Panthers who were just, I don't know. The Panthers are in like a generational trash or they're in just a generational curse. I don't know what you'd call it, but it's just, I don't know. Like, if you're a fan of the Panthers still, it's like you deserve a discount. You deserve like all of the marbles and all the medals because you really are sticking through it, through thick and thin. You know what I'm saying? All I would say is don't count out Dallas's ability to try and make this one close. I mean, I'm not saying that they necessarily are going to lose it, but I'm just going to give this one to Atlanta. They're at home. I think they got the momentum to go in here and just beat Dallas, even though Dallas is kind of a solid team. So I got Atlanta surprisingly winning this one. All right, so now moving to the next matchup, and we got the Miami Dolphins going to Buffalo to play the Bills. Buffalo, this is another one of those matchups where I'm like, okay, this is like one of those where it's like, yeah, they're kind of a clear favorite to win this one, but Miami with Tua, maybe they could do something, maybe they couldn't, who knows, we'll see. But what I was curious last week when they lost to Arizona, I'm like, wow, so maybe Tua's not like 100% like back yet. I mean, I know it was his first game back from having that concussion, which that concussion was unbelievable, honestly. I'm like, your instinct would tell you, right? Maybe it's not necessarily a good idea to run headfirst into a guy. Instead, you can just slide. That's what a lot of the QBs do. They slide when they run. But I guess Tua wasn't thinking at the moment, and then that just happened. So, kind of unfortunate for him. But seeing as how they lost last week, I don't know if it gives me enough confidence in them to say, like, okay, they're going to go into Buffalo and beat them. So, I just think Buffalo has an edge in this one. I just think they're the favorites. So I got Buffalo winning this one. All right, so in the next matchup, we got the New Orleans Saints going to Carolina to play the Panthers. It's funny, we were just talking about the Panthers and how bad they are. But I was thinking, like, this could actually be one of the, like, games where they actually could win because New Orleans is kind of in the same situation right now where they're kind of dealing with injuries. They're kind of falling off. Like, the first 2 weeks of the season, they were like the God Squad. Like, they just were... They looked really good the first 2 weeks of the season, and then it all just fell apart when Derek Carr got injured, and then, it kind of sucks when that stuff happens, but, hey, it is what it is, right? But I thought, like, okay, since Carolina's at home, maybe their home field advantage isn't that big, but I thought, like, maybe they could take advantage of a team that, like, is kind of flailing at the moment, but even with that, on paper, I just realized I'm like, I think New Orleans is going to pull this one out. This is one of those games where it's like it's a very easy game for them to win. It is Carolina. They still are a pretty bad team, but I'm still leaving that opportunity out there that, like, all right, at least I'm still thinking, like, maybe it could go the other way. But for right now, I'll say that New Orleans is going to win just because on paper, like, I don't think this should be a team that will give a game up like this. All right, in the next game, we got the Cincinnati Bengals hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. So for this one, I was actually kind of surprised last week with how Las Vegas did. I thought they wouldn't have got as much points as they did, particularly against Kansas City. I wasn't expecting them to beat Kansas City, but they still did pretty well for playing Kansas City. That's all I said. And Cincinnati, they kind of did let me down last week. I thought they actually were going to pull it off against Philadelphia, but then Philadelphia had other plans and they just completely went off on them. They got 37 points and a win against them. So I think this week they will bounce back and show they still have a spot in the playoff picture, which it's kind of weird that they're at 3-5. You would think like, okay, maybe they would turn it around at some point, but maybe things are getting a little bit slow for them. But I do still have faith that like they will try and make it interesting. I think I could say the same thing about Cleveland too. I think they are coming up pretty soon here, but I just think still like the Raiders are. It's just going to be a while for them. I think they're in a sticky situation right now. A lot of problems are going on with them. So I just think Cincinnati will win it, and that's why. All right, so in this next matchup, we got the Los Angeles Chargers going to Cleveland to play the Browns. Yes, I did expect the Chargers to win last week, and they did. They came through. Good for them, I guess, right? Last week was kind of interesting. And there were some games where it's like, that last week was probably one of my more worst weeks because a lot of games it was like I really didn't know who to pick. I mean, I do have confidence in I do have some faith in the teams that I picked to win. Like, yeah, they'll win, but it doesn't mean that there's still a chance that you think okay, maybe they won't win it. But for this game, I'm kind of going a little bit with the upset of the week here. So for the upset of the week, I got Cleveland beating Los Angeles here, and here's why. Last week they exceeded all expectations for me. I think. I mean, maybe it had to do with So Jameis Winston is their starting QB right now, and maybe that's why the expectations for them have kind of risen. And it's like I said, the team's still good, but it's like if they got a QB in there that's pretty good, and or it can at least somewhat play. It's like they could really get on a run here, and I'm kind of predicting them now to go on a run here where they will win some games. And I was really surprised last week. It was like Jameis Winston, this guy, he's kind of been flying around the NFL. He was mainly known for being a backup on the Saints, but what he does now is that he goes to Cleveland and drops 300 yards in a game last week and against Baltimore, and I was really surprised when I heard about that stat. So I think that they will continue this momentum. All right, in the next matchup, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Now, you may be asking me about the logo. It's like, that looks like the old school Philadelphia Eagles logo, the Kelly Green one, the one from the 80s, right? And the reason why I have that in there is because I heard somewhere that they're going to be wearing those Kelly Green uniforms out there. So every time a team wears a throwback or an old school uniform, I will put in their old school logo, although Jacksonville has yet to wear some of their old school uniforms yet, even though I've been using their first logo for pretty much this whole entire time I've been doing these predictions. So Jacksonville, you have yet to use your throwback uniforms. I hope you do because those uniforms were kind of sick, not going to lie. But as for this game, I think it's just clear to me, I did doubt Philadelphia last week. I kind of did underestimate them. Maybe not. Maybe I did. Who knows? I just thought it'd be an upset last week, but I think Philadelphia, they're at home. They're wearing the Kelly Green. Maybe, uniforms don't really impact the game much. It's just a matter of aesthetics, really. But I just think Philadelphia has kind of gotten the momentum back after, a little bit of a rocky start. So give me them to win this. All right, in the next game, we got the Chicago Bears going to Arizona to play the Cardinals. So Chicago, I mean, it was a close game. I was predicting a close game last week against Washington, and that's what happened. But the ending was just like, oh my gosh. I completely understand why Caleb Williams threw his helmet down. It was just one of those moments where it's like, they kind of were doing everything right in the end, and then all of a sudden, Washington had that just miraculous play at the end there. I was just, if you're a Bears fan, that must have been really frustrating. But as for this matchup, I'm not saying that, Chicago's going to necessarily fall into a slump here, but I kind of could see an upset here because, right, they're going to Arizona, right? I say this a lot, but like home field advantage, maybe it does matter in the NFL. It kind of does matter in the NFL, I think. It doesn't matter as much as like certainly basketball or whatever, but I think it gives you a little bit of an edge in the game, and I think this is one of those instances where I could see Arizona winning this one. I didn't expect them to win last week. I did, but I I just thought they wouldn't beat Tua with that Miami Dolphins offense, but my thought was if they could beat a team like that, then surely they can beat Chicago. All right, so in the next game we got the Detroit Lions going to Green Bay to play the Packers. So this one is another interesting matchup. So this probably will be a battle for who will top the NFC North. And I have more to discuss about the NFC North as this video will go on, but this is another game where I'm like, it's 50-50. It really could go either way, I think, But I think Lambeau has one of the best home field advantages in the league. Although 2 years ago they lost this in the same matchup against the Lions, and it was a game that they would have, if they won that game, they would have been in the playoffs. But ultimately they didn't. But ultimately they didn't win, and that was good. And that happened to be Aaron Rodgers' last game as a Packer. So I think this time around they definitely could win this game. Definitely get, or catch Detroit up and get a win out of them. But Detroit, they're looking pretty good. I remember talking to some people. I'm like, Detroit probably is the best team in the league right now. Believe it or not, on paper it's like they're just the best. They're just the best team on paper. It's like on all sides of the ball they can do it well, and I think they could do it at a high level. Basically, just the top team in the league. I did hear something where Jordan Love kind of had some issues with injuries, but I think he still will play in this game. So if he's playing, I think that gives him a huge benefit too. So I just think Green Bay will just slightly beat Detroit in this one. All right, in this matchup, we got the Los Angeles Rams going to Seattle to play the Seahawks. And Los Angeles, you guys kind of did surprise me last week. They are getting it back together. So they started off, they were like 1-4, but now they've won the past couple of games. They beat Minnesota. I'll have more to talk about Minnesota in probably the next matchup, but I was pleasantly surprised. They did win that game, although it was at home in SoFi Stadium. So maybe it kind of wasn't really a surprise that they won, but this is a game where I'm like, I could see them with this momentum that they have now going into Seattle and beating them. And Seattle's kind of a intimidating place to play in, but I'm not seeing too many signs right now that Seattle is getting it together. They have been at the top of the standings for pretty much the first half of the season here. It's kind of interesting because now we're at like the second half of the season. We're like at the midway point of the season because we're at week 9. So this is definitely going to be the time where it's like, you got to really start to lock in because, before you know it, playoff talks are going to happen, whether you're going to be in it or not, in these weeks, this is the time, to prove whether you'll be in it or not. So in the Sunday Night Football matchup this week, we got the Indianapolis Colts going to Minnesota to play the Vikings. I will note that this game was flexed up, so the original game that was going to be here was the Philadelphia. No, yeah, it was the Philadelphia matchup where the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. It was that matchup. Yeah, I love how I say it the same way that I do, like when I go into every single one of these matchups. So and so team is going to here to play this. I'm so robotic, I know, right? So for this matchup, it's actually kind of interesting. So Indianapolis, they made the decision to bench Anthony Richardson in favor of Joe Flacco, a freaking old man. He's 39 out here. And they decided to go with him. They think that that they have more faith in him beating the Colts than if they had Anthony Richardson in there. I don't know what exactly is going on with that situation. It's something to certainly watch out for, but Minnesota, I think now, unfortunately, there's a lot of Vikings fans that, watch these videos. They're like, that doesn't figure my decision either to say, like, okay, I'm going to pick them because, okay, I'm going to pick the Vikings to win because, a lot of Vikings fans watch my videos, so I have to be favorite to them. That doesn't happen here. But I just thought, in the first few weeks of the season, they were looking pretty good. And then I saw some on Thursday Night Football last week where I'm like, oh shit, things I think are starting to fall apart. And this happens a lot with them. They will start off pretty good, I will say, and then midway point of the season, that's usually when things start to fall off for them. And then they usually just will end up as like not a 9-8 team or a 7-10 team, and basically end up as mid because that first half of the season where they start off, it will be pretty good for them, and then just the other half of the season they just can't execute. They can't get it or make their way to the finish line, which was kind of different from 2 years ago when they were pretty good all around, but then they just lost in that first round against the Giants, and it was just that was a strange matchup. So I think things are starting to fall apart for Minnesota. I could see them still like win this game, getting it back on track. It definitely would. It definitely would stop the talks, or they would beat the allegations of being a team that just starts off pretty good and then falls off like after the midpoint of the season. So yeah, in this matchup, I think Indianapolis will slightly win this one. I just give them a little bit of an edge just because of the momentum right now. I think they got it. And another thing, oh my gosh, I don't know. We'll get into this later. So in this matchup, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. I was kind of surprised with how good Tampa Bay did last week, considering how much weapons they lost on offense. They still got 20 points. Good for them, right? They still kept together somewhat, but they didn't pull out the win against Atlanta. So, as for Kansas City, they are right now 7-0, which means that they are the only undefeated team in the league right now, which is actually kind of surprising. And, I'm just thinking here, like, what game is it going to be where they're going to drop it? And I'm just not seeing any games right now where they're going to drop it. I just don't think they're going to lose it right now, This is a Tampa Bay team, like I said earlier. It's like they lost Chris Godwin and Mike Evans to injuries. So I just think their abilities on offense are going to be severely hindered. And then you got this team here like Kansas City, who is really just on all sides of the ball, they're pretty dominant. On defense, they're pretty good. On offense, they're pretty good. Although it's questionable how many good weapons they have on offense. But it's just the Mahomes factor, so you don't really need much good players on offense. I mean, if anything is proven is that you don't really need a lot of good wide receivers on offense if you have just the guy, if you have the QB in there. And I think that's something that a lot of teams fall into. It's like they do get a lot of wide receivers and do beef up their team, which makes them look good, or at least makes the QB look good. Because it's like, dude, you're throwing it to like Deebo Samuel and handing it off to Christian McCaffrey every week. I mean, come on, it's like obviously you're going to be a good QB in that situation. Cough, cough. I'm talking about Brock Purdy here. But I just think Kansas City will get this one done. They'll get the job done. They'll get the job done. That's actually kind of funny to say. So, I think they'll win this one. And anyways, guys, that's going to do for this big video of what I think will happen around the NFL. And until next week, guys.